When Karoline Leavitt and Robert Darrow appeared together on American Spotlight that Sunday night, no one anticipated the outcome. While the renowned actor sat comfortably in his chair at the other end of the curving desk, the 26-year-old Trump spokeswoman sat quietly at one end with his hands folded. No one had foreseen the dramatic encounter that was about to take place on live television, but the atmosphere in the studio was already high. Darrow leaned forward, his face tense with rage, and launched into a rehearsed tirade on threats to democracy just as host Maria Donovan had just completed her introduction. Leavitt's look was recorded by the cameras as one of someone planning their next move in a chess game, rather than one of intimidation. The entire country was shocked by what transpired next. As Darrow stopped to catch her breath, Leavitt took one sheet of paper out of her portfolio. "Before we continue," she stated with unexpected confidence, "I think the American people deserve to know about this." She produced what looked like a printed email. In a moment, Darrow's visage changed from one of righteous wrath to one of far darker expression. The blood drained from his cheeks so fast that backstage producers began muttering over their headphones as he recognized that page instantly. His renowned voice trembled with emotion as he screamed, "Where did you get that?" But the Hollywood elite didn't scare Leavitt. She was about to reveal something that would leave millions of people stunned and destroy Darrow's well-constructed public persona. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you want to see more videos of influential people being held responsible when they least expect it. You will be shocked by what transpires in this confrontation, which the mainstream media has made a valiant effort to hide. Robert Darrow has established himself for decades as a vocal political voice in addition to being one of America's best performers. His film jobs had decreased by the time he was 80, but his political engagement had increased. Over the years, his anti-Trump remarks have become more vehement, progressing from criticism to headline-grabbing personal assaults. His every comment was enthusiastically echoed by the media, who treated his political views with the same respect as his Oscar-winning performances. When he entered the political sphere, nobody asked if the man who had so firmly depicted strong people and criminals was playing a different character. However, rumors circulated behind the scenes regarding the discrepancy between Darrow's private behavior and his public remarks. One former employee told the New York Post that, although he preaches about democracy and equality, he treats his employees like they are beneath him. Up until now, the stories I was able to share had mostly stayed untold. Darrow openly hated all that Karoline Leavitt stood for: young, conservative, and unreservedly Donald Trump supporting. She had climbed quickly through Republican ranks to become the national press secretary for the Trump campaign. She had previously worked as Congresswoman Elise Stefanik's communications director and assistant press secretary in the White House before turning 27. Leavitt had established a reputation for refusing to back down in the face of hostile media, in contrast to other political spokespersons who faltered under duress. Her refusal to accept loaded questions or incorrect premises during her appearances on CNN and MSNBC went viral. Even detractors acknowledged that, especially given her age, she had exceptional composure and fast thinking. "She doesn't get rattled," a Democratic strategist who wished to stay nameless has stated. "Under such strain, the majority of individuals her age would collapse. She thrives on it." The American Spotlight program was intended to be a standard political program. The adored actor would receive different treatment, while the youthful Trump representative would be subjected to a barrage of questions. They were arranged together with the express purpose of creating viral moments in which the Hollywood icon would overwhelm the young Republican with his vehement criticisms. The presenter, Maria Donovan, had made a career out of seeming impartial while quietly giving preference to her favorite guests. She had given Darrow a pre-show briefing that contained possible questions and angles he might use to his advantage. No similar courtesy had been extended to Leavitt. One of the production assistants said, "She's walking into an ambush," as they got ready for the show. "3 against 1, said the audience's host, Darrow. "Poor girl doesn't stand a chance." They were unaware that Leavitt had spent weeks getting ready for this. An unanticipated source, a former personal assistant of Darrow, had contacted the Trump team with information about the actor's financial operations and behind-the-scenes behavior that clearly contradicted his public statements. The stakes were high. Darrow's meticulously cultivated reputation as an activist with moral convictions was at stake. Leavitt saw this as a chance to reveal the hypocrisy that she felt pervaded a large portion of Hollywood's political involvement. It would be a unique opportunity for the American people to see behind the scenes of celebrity advocacy. Leavitt met with her small crew at an office in Washington, D.C., 2 days prior to the event to discuss their plan. He's going to attack you fiercely. Personal assaults, emotional pleas, and the like were cautioned against by her media consultant. He will attempt to portray you as an unskilled child. Leavitt nodded and took another look at the papers arranged on the table. That's precisely what I'm hoping for, she said. The descent is more difficult the larger the pedestal. Niro came at the studio in an EIA private SUV on the morning of the program, accompanied by a group of 5 individuals who arranged his schedule and cleared his route. He practiced his talking points with a political advisor who specialized in celebrity coaching for 2 hours while getting ready and applying cosmetics. Leavitt showed there by himself with a single leather portfolio. She only put on makeup for half an hour, spending the remaining time in a little green room going over her notes and papers. She was quietly focused and had a determined expression on her face when a production assistant arrived to take her to the scene. "Are you nervous?" said the assistant, taken aback by Leavitt's composed manner. "No," she said, smiling a little. "Just ready." The presenter, the production crew, and even Robert Niro were unaware that this well-planned encounter was going to take a sharp turn for the worst when the red studio lights came on and the cameras started rolling. Even before the first question was asked, the anxiety on set was evident. Before diving straight into Niro, host Maria Donovan gave an apparently fair introduction about bringing disparate viewpoints together. "You have been vocal about what you see to be dangers to American democracy, Mr. Niro. Could you provide more details about your worries?" Donovan spoke in a gentle, courteous tone that was meant for visitors who were to be admired rather than questioned. Niro sat up straight in his chair and transitioned into what appeared to be a practiced speech with ease. He started out by saying, "Look, we're at a crossroads in this country," with the same passion that had made him a Hollywood icon. "I'm afraid of what Trump and his followers are attempting to do. We should all be afraid of it. They are assaulting our whole way of life, eroding our institutions, and attacking the press." In an obvious attempt to depict Leavitt's uneasiness, the camera switched to her for a brief moment. Rather, they discovered her observing Niro with a courteous curiosity, utterly unaffected by his initial assault. Niro went on unabated for about 3 minutes, his remarks becoming more intimate. He pointed to Leavitt and added, "These people, these enablers," without glancing at her, "they're either cynical or misled. They either don't care as long as they have power or don't know what they're supporting." After giving Leavitt a sympathetic nod, Donovan turned to face him. "Those are powerful words. In what way do you address worries that your candidate threatens democracy?" Many seasoned politicians have been derailed by this type of loaded question, which basically asked Leavitt to defend herself against a charge that was part of the inquiry. The studio audience, which was crammed with Niro fans, leaned forward with anticipation. "It seems intriguing to me how quickly we've gone from policy disagreements to questioning people's motivations and character," Leavitt said in a calm and steady voice. "Mr. Niro has a right to express his own views, but he loudly sneered, 'Millions of Americans support President Trump because of his actual policies and results, not because they are cynical or deluded.' Outcomes such as January 6th resemble attempts to rig an election." Leavitt did not panic. "Although I am aware that there are strong feelings around these topics, I would be pleased to talk about President Trump's economic achievements. Border security and the Middle East peace agreements. Smoke and mirrors, that's all." Niro broke off, raising his voice. To divert attention from the attack on our democracy. Instead of moderating, Donovan nodded in agreement with Niro. "That is a worry that many Americans have." For the following several minutes, the pattern persisted. Niro's claims are becoming more and more vehement. With her inquiries, Donovan intensified them, and Leavitt tried to reroute the conversation to policy talks. Following each of Niro's remarks, the studio crowd started to mutter in agreement, which obviously favored the actor. Then the pivotal moment arrived. Leavitt's countenance significantly shifted after Niro's especially passionate diatribe about defending American principles. She waited for him to finish, then spoke in a controlled tone that strangely demanded attention. Mr. Darrow, you've spoken a lot about values tonight, about democracy, equality, and standing up for working people. She stopped and stared at him. Would you say those values are important to you personally, not just politically? The change briefly surprised Darrow, but he soon got back to normal. I have, of course, always adhered to my principles. I speak up because of this. Leavitt gave a contemplative nod. Would you also argue that when someone adopts a moral stance, sincerity counts, and that public figures should live up to the ideals they advocate? It became quieter in the poem studio. Darrow's eyes squinted a little. Of course, you should walk the walk if you're going to talk the talk. I've always had that opinion. Leavitt has been waiting for this very moment. She took out a little stack of papers from her portfolio. Her voice was still chatty, but it had a new edge that immediately unnerved the production crew. I'm glad to hear you say that, she continued, because I've received some information that makes me wonder if your private behavior is consistent with what you say in public. The expression of Darrow froze. Sensing danger, Donovan attempted to step in. We ought to concentrate on the current political problems, in my opinion. Leavitt refused to be sidetracked and stressed that this was vital without raising her voice. In particular, Mr. Darrow has questioned the morality and intentions of Trump supporters. He made this about morals and honesty. I believe it's reasonable to consider whether he has the same expectations of himself. The studio went quiet. Observing from the sidelines, Darrow's publicist moved forward but refrained from interfering with the live broadcast. Leavitt displayed the initial document. Maria Gonzalez, who worked as domestic help at your flat from 2017 to 2022, has signed this affidavit. She claims that even though you openly supported a $15 minimum wage, you paid your domestic workers $9 per hour without overtime or benefits, and made them sign non-disclosure agreements to keep them from talking about their working circumstances. Darrow's face drained of blood. It was an authentic document. He instantly recognized the details. That's a private matter, he stumbled, his renowned poise clearly faltering. Is it? With an unwavering yet courteous tone, Leavitt asked, you have referred to President Trump and his followers as hypocrites on several occasions. I just want to know if your private behavior and public advocacy are consistent. She produced another piece of paper. Additionally, I have proof that 3 of your production firms utilize Cayman Islands offshore accounts to evade U.S. taxes, despite your public calls for greater taxes on the rich. Do you want to clarify that disparity? It exploded in the E studio. There was an audible gasp from the audience. In a frantic attempt to recover control, Donovan partially got up from her seat. Our ad break is over. No! Darrow abruptly shouted, his voice piercing with rage. No respite. I'd want to talk about this. With his famous attention now fully directed onto Leavitt, he turned to face her. From whence did you obtain these records? You got these from whom? It was a crucial error, indirectly verifying the paper's legitimacy by raising doubts about the source rather than rejecting the substance. Leavitt saw the opportunity at once. Are you questioning their veracity? Quietly, she asked. The moment was suspended. Leaning closer to their TVs were millions of spectators. Other network producers scrambled to inform their news teams about what was happening on live television in studios throughout America. Everything would change when Darrow responded. Those documents are private property that has been stolen, Darrow said, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. Sweat was now apparent on his brow, and the studio lights captured it. This is not journalism. It's a political attack piece. Leavitt maintained her composure and spoke in a forceful yet steady tone. With all due respect, Mr. Darrow, you haven't addressed the accuracy of the facts. Did you pay your domestic workers less than the minimum wage you openly support? Under the desk, the camera captured Darrow's hands squeezing into fists. After decades of masterfully directing his performances, the renowned actor was now clearly having difficulty keeping his cool. My private arrangements with domestic workers are private, he demanded, raising his voice. You're not allowed to. However, that's exactly the point, Leavitt interrupted, remaining composed but unflinching. You've questioned the morals and intentions of those who have different political views from you for years. You have referred to them as frauds and hypocrites. I only want to know if you subject yourself to the same level of public scrutiny. Maria Donovan, the host, tried to reroute in a desperate bid to take back control of her program. Perhaps we should return to discussing policy differences. The stern words, "This has to do with policy," came from Leavitt. This relates to whether public officials who endorse specific policies actually believe in them enough to follow them in their own lives. She looked back at Darrow, who was now staring at her with an angry expression that had been revealed. "Mr. Darrow, you have argued for higher taxes on the wealthy to fund social programs. But according to these financial documents, Tribeca Enterprises, your production company, has used offshore tax shelters in the Cayman Islands, Bermuda, and Luxembourg to shield millions of dollars from U.S. taxes. Is that correct?" The studio audience, which had previously been so supportive of Darrow, now sat in stunned silence. The cognitive dissonance was clear as they witnessed a renowned figure they admired being painstakingly exposed for hypocrisy by a person 50 years his junior. Now from offstage, Darrow's publicist was frantically pleading with him to slash her neck to end the interview before further damage was done. Nevertheless, whether out of pride or anger, Darrow refused to give up. "You bring these papers to ambush me on live television," he said, stabbing Leavitt with his finger. "The goal here is not to have an honest discourse. It's a well-planned strike." "I understand you're upset," Leavitt remarked in a direct voice that was neither triumphant nor apologetic. "But I'm not charging you for this. These are documented facts about how your business operates that are directly at odds with the guidelines you want customers to follow." A third piece of paper came out of her hand. "Furthermore, despite your vocal support of the Me Too movement, 4 production assistants who worked on your most recent film projects have testified that you continued to create an environment where young women were expected to tolerate unpleasant behavior and comments." At this moment, Darrow's composure finally gave out. Papers were scattered and water glasses were shattered when his palm struck the desk. "That's a damn lie," he shouted, his face contorted with anger. "You can't just sit there and Mr. Darrow," Late interrupted, her voice piercing his anger with sudden intensity. "I have my signature on the affidavit. I have dates, timings, and witnesses. Would you prefer that I discuss the contents of them or read them aloud to you?" The control room was in disarray. In preparation for the commercial break, the director was making frenzied motions. Donovan appeared still, utterly unprepared for this amazing reversal in her well-planned attack. Darrow abruptly got up and ripped off his microphone. "Trump's propagandists won't attack me while I sit here spreading misinformation. The interview is now over." His voice trembled with anger as he glared at the presenter and then at the cameras. "And this is what you let happen." While he raced off the set, knocking down his chair, Leavitt remained seated calmly. Instead of capturing a triumphant or mocking expression, the lace camera recorded a melancholy, almost sorrowful expression on her face. She spoke straight to the camera after Donovan seemed unable of continuing the performance, stating, "I didn't come here to attack Mr. Darrow personally. I started to stress how crucial honesty and consistency are in public discourse. When powerful people lecture ordinary Americans about how to vote, live, and think, one would question if they hold themselves to the same standards." After realizing that removing her would just make the situation worse, the director led her to continue. The most powerful aspect of Leavitt's message was delivered in front of millions of shocked spectators at that impromptu moment. "This isn't about left versus right," she said, her voice full of earnest conviction. "Performance versus truth is at issue. It concerns whether we can have open debates about real issues or if we are all only playing roles in a political stage where honesty is meaningless." The damage was done when the show eventually cut to commercial 3 minutes later. Not by a peer or political equal, but by a woman who was young enough to be his granddaughter and who had facts he couldn't deny. It became Darrow's most uncomfortable public moment, rather than his triumphant takedown of a young Trump spokesperson. In living rooms and green rooms throughout America, millions of onlookers sat in stunned silence, attempting to process what they had just witnessed. Not only was one celebrity's hypocrisy made public, but political discourse also underwent a significant shift. By that evening, Darrow Exposed had become a global sensation. Television networks rushed to set up panels to examine what many were calling the most significant political dispute of the year. The video of Diro's outburst and tumultuous departure had already been viewed by over 50 million people on social media. CNN media expert Brian Palmer summed up the significance. As we witness today, Robert Daro's day wasn't just a bad one. There was a dramatic shift in the relative power between Hollywood action and political responsibility. Diro's publicist quickly wrote a statement claiming that he had been bombarded with inaccurate information that was presented without context and that he would be rectifying these misrepresentations when the time was appropriate. Damage control was implemented too late, though. Within hours, independent reporting confirmed the document's authenticity. The Wall Street Journal verified that Diro's producing companies did in fact employ the offshore tax structures referenced in Leavitt's filings. The New York Times confirmed that former domestic workers had filed wage complaints supporting the assertions. After their stories were acknowledged on national television, 3 of the production assistants mentioned in Leavitt's third document had come forward by midnight, feeling more secure. As anticipated, replies on Capitol Hill were divided along party lines, with a few notable outliers. The statement by Congressman Jaime Racine that, if we're going to call for ethical standards in public life, those standards have to apply to everyone, regardless of their politics or their star power, angered many progressive Democrats. Media organizations who had earlier minimized or disregarded the altercation were forced to report on it as the story gained momentum. Many tried to recast the story as a privacy violation instead of exposing hypocrisy, but their attempts were unsuccessful as more information surfaced that supported Leavitt's claims. The response in Hollywood was more nuanced. Although many celebrities officially distanced themselves from Daro, the industry was humming in secret with uneasy acknowledgement. According to one A-list director who spoke to Variety under condition of anonymity, we all know people living this contradiction, preaching social justice while treating their own staff terribly. This is making a lot of awkward talks necessary. Karoline Leavitt's lone news conference regarding the event took place in the small lobby of her hotel in Washington, D.C., the morning following the broadcast. She maintained the same level of composure as she did throughout the actual incident, despite reporters yelling questions at her. This was never about personally attacking Mr. Daro, she said. This was about criticizing a system in which certain individuals are empowered to offer moral and policy lectures to Americans without ever being held responsible for their true fidelity to the ideas they advocate. Leavitt was upfront when asked where she received the materials. These were submitted by persons who had direct interaction with Mr. Daro. They were fed up with him advocating values in public that he disregarded or transgressed in private. They decided the public should be informed of the truth, so they approached me. Political watchers of all shades recognized that the war had larger repercussions. Commentators hailed what they characterized as the piercing of Hollywood's moral superiority on Fox News. More sober voices noted on MSNBC that Leavitt had highlighted a vulnerability in the backing of progressive celebrities. Diane Lawrence, a political scientist, remarked on PBS NewsHour, "Your own behavior becomes fair game when you position yourself as a moral authority." Leavitt used a well-known philosophical argument regarding the coherence of private action and public advocacy. There may be a greater disparity between Hollywood's public and private positions because of how terrible it was. Daro wasn't the only one impacted by the conclusion of the week. Several well-known celebrities canceled planned political appearances. 2 Hollywood fundraiser events were placed on indefinite hold. In Los Angeles, publicists reported panicked calls from clients worried about potential inconsistencies between their private and public conduct. The altercation also changed Karoline Leavitt's reputation in Republican politics. Previously seen primarily as a skilled spokeswoman, she was suddenly recognized as a significant political player in her own right. Job offers rushed in from campaigns, media outlets, and political groups. Her social media following increased by almost 800% in a single week. More significantly, rather than attacking the freedom of expression of celebrities, Leavitt had offered a paradigm for challenging their political activity that focused on examining the consistency of their words and actions. It was difficult to dismiss the tactic as just political, since it resonated with principles that transcended party boundaries. 2 weeks following the confrontation, surveys found that 64% of Americans would now view celebrity political endorsements with greater suspicion. In a separate study, 71% of participants said that public figures who advocate for certain policies should be held accountable for them in both their personal and professional lives. Darrow had serious personal consequences. Citing health concerns, he pulled out of 2 planned film projects. He quietly canceled his planned speaking tour of college campuses. His name was removed off the advisory boards of several progressive organizations. 3 weeks after the meeting, a little photo captured by a tourist's cell phone camera was maybe the most startling. Darrow was clearly agitated as a young waiter approached his table at a Manhattan eatery. After decades of being respected, the once dominant actor now viewed ordinary interactions with weariness, knowing that anybody might notice the difference between his private and public life. 6 months later, Leavitt provided perhaps the most insightful explanation of the confrontation's enduring significance in a reflective interview with The New Yorker. "It wasn't really about me or Robert Darrow," she said. "It dealt with a more general issue that our political culture has to consider. Are we evaluating concepts and policies based on their actual merits, or are we only reacting to the message's sender and their level of conviction? The difference between authenticity and performing is important in a functioning democracy." Despite her sudden celebrity, the author noted that Leavitt still carried the same little leather portfolio she had brought to the deadly interview. Maybe a reminder that, just as in life, content matters more in politics than style. Darrow returned to acting at last, but his days of making unquestionable political claims were over. Now, the actor who had played some of the most famous movie characters had come to see how much of real life might be compared to a theatrical production. In order to view more videos that aren't featured by the mainstream media, please like and subscribe if this study of political hypocrisy was informative. Make this material available to your loved ones so they may see the truth behind the political spectacle. Please leave a comment below with your thoughts on celebrity activism and if public officials should be held accountable for their deeds. Remember, facts matter, and if we band together, we can make sure that powerful voices are held to the same standards that they demand of others.